Welcome to Comics Conversation, where I do my best to guide new Flash comic book readers through the sometimes confusing Flash reading order. In this video, I will be going over The Flash, The Death of Iris West hardcover book. This is a 15-issue miniseries spanning from issues of The Flash 270 all the way to 284, and as the name implies, Iris West will die. When I do these overviews, I want to make sure that I keep it as spoiler-free as possible, but in the event that a book title reveals the plot of the story, there is not much I can do about that. On another note, something to mention is that there really have not been any Bronze Age books available to buy, at least for The Flash, and if you want to see all the different ages in comics and which Flash books are in what age, it is all outlined in my Flash reading order document, and I will leave a link to that in the description below. But getting back to the Bronze Age, there's only one other Bronze Age Flash book available to purchase, and that is The Trial of the Flash. This book takes place right before Crisis on Infinite Earths and at the end of the Bronze Age, and that book is in black and white. I have been tempted to track one down to read, but I am hoping DC releases Flash omnibus books of the Bronze Age like they did with the Silver Age. Now going into the book, this story starts with issue number 270, which you can tell takes place right in the middle of the Bronze Age, but from reading through the book, there doesn't seem to be too much past reading that is required to understand what happens in this book, so it is a good book to pick up if you want to just read a great Flash story and not be confused on what is going on. By the second issue of this story, issue 271, we are introduced to this one character, Clive Yorkin, whose name you may recognize from the Flash TV series Season 3, Episode 12, Untouchable. And although Clive Yorkin's powers from the comics and TV show are slightly similar, their character as a whole is completely different. In the comics, Clive Yorkin is an escaped convict with increased strength and is able to drain the life force out of people. And as the story develops more throughout the book, he becomes suspect number 1 for the killing of Iris West. Focusing on another part of the story, we are introduced to another character who is known as Melanie, and she is someone who is obsessed with the Flash and discovering his secret identity. She also has telepathy, where she is able to control the minds of others, and she uses this ability to lure the Flash to her place so she can find out who is under the mask. Something to mention is that this book does go into some serious topics, where Iris thinks Barry is seeing another woman, and since there is a tracker in Barry's Flash costume, Iris follows Barry when Melanie uses her telepathy to bring the Flash to her place. She unmasks the Flash and is disappointed with who is under the mask because of how generic Barry's face is, and by the time Melanie leaves, Iris is already there and sees that Barry was there too. Fast forwarding a little bit, Barry explained what happened, and Barry and Iris proceed with their plan to go to the masquerade party they were invited to. They planned on going as Batman and Batgirl, but since the Batman costume never arrived, Barry decided to use his actual superhero costume for the party. This issue, 275, is where the deed is done. In this issue, we witness the death of Iris West. Before we see this happen, Barry and Iris are enjoying themselves at the party, and at this time, unbeknownst to the guests at the party, Clive Yorkin shows up trying to take out Barry since he knows Barry's secret, and earlier Clive Yorkin had a run-in with the Flash. By the end of the issue, Barry and Iris get separated, and when Barry hears a crash in the room next door, he rushes in and finds Clive Yorkin with Iris on the ground. When Barry enters the room, Clive Yorkin jumps out of the window and is gone with the wind. Barry then collapses to the floor, and his last words are calling out for someone to call an ambulance to help Iris. And then he blacks out and the issue ends. In the following issues, Barry is trying to piece together what happened that night, and his memory starts coming back. We get little details to what else happened, but before we get any more information, Barry is told that Iris was announced dead before he even got to the room. This leads to everyone trying to help Barry and be there for him, but no matter what, he is in denial. When he finally asks to see her body, it all hits him in an instant and finally accepts the death of his wife. It isn't until issue 281 that we see who killed Iris and what actually happened, but I will let you find that out when you read it. This has been out for a while, and I have seen other videos talking about who the person was who killed Iris, but in case someone who hasn't read this book yet and doesn't know, I don't want to spoil what happens, because it is really cool to see how the rest of the story unfolds. There is not too much more that I can talk about in this book, since I do not want to spoil anything or give too many of the details away, but I will skip to the last page of the book and we get a clear look at Iris's tombstone. She died in 1979, but the date of her birth is crossed out, and this foreshadows what is to come in the later issues of The Flash in the Bronze Age. Since this next part will be spoiling what happened in the book, and specifically what the tombstone is foreshadowing, I will just say that if you do not want to know what happens in the conclusion of the book, you can end the video, and I will just say that this is an amazing book written by Cary Bates, and if you get the chance, definitely get the book and find out what happens, because it is a pretty iconic story, and it is something that is even referenced in modern comics of The Flash. But if you are still here and do not mind having the end spoiled, we find out that it is the Reverse Flash who did it. We get flashbacks of his methodical planning and the things he did leading up to Iris' death. Now switching over to the life story of the Flash. This can be found in the 7th trade paperback of The Flash written by Mark Waid, but I like having it in this format because it looks like how it does in the actual Flash comics. In the comics, there is an actual The Life Story of the Flash book in their world, and this book is from the pages of the comics and how it looks in their world. The reason for switching to this book is that in here we get a look into the death of Iris West, but how it is told through her eyes. The stories told in this book have already been told in issues that take place after the death of Iris West's story, but since it is difficult to find the single issues of the Flash from this era of comics, this is a good way to find out how Iris is able to come back. In this book, there is a table of contents, and you can see what some of the stories are about in this book, but what we are mainly focusing on in this video is chapter 9, 10, 11, and 14. So in chapter 9, flash forward, we learn that Iris is adopted, and that she is actually from the 30th century. Her biological parents' names are Eric and Fran Russell, and Iris was sent from the year 2945 to the 20th century. This all ties back to Iris's tombstone in the last page here, since the writers did not want to spoil the time era where she is from, but also wanted to foreshadow that there was something more going on in her origin story. Chapter 10, Sudden Death. We get a recap of what happened in the Flash The Death of Iris West story, but the thing that was left out of the original story was that Iris was saved a split second before she was killed. We are not told until chapter 14 who saved her, but the instant before the Reverse Flash killed her, her mind was pulled from her body and was sent into a sort of limbo. Skipping to chapter 14, The Trial of the Flash, we learn who saved Iris. It was her biological parents who pulled her mind from her body and sent her mind all the way to the future to be placed in a vessel identical to her own body, so she could still be alive but in the 30th century. There are other events that take place in the Trial of the Flash story, but the main thing that relates to the Death of Iris West book is that, by the end of it, Barry and Iris are finally reunited. Sad thing is, this happy ending does not last long, because there is a crisis upon us, a crisis on Infinite Earths, and from here, this all leads to the start of the Crisis on Infinite Earths DC event. If you check out my Flash Reading Order Part 1 video, I explain where this event takes place, but let me know if you want to see an in-depth overview of this book, because this is a major DC event, and this is one of the 2 main times the DC Universe has had a significant reboot, and this event has a major impact on the Flash comic title as a whole. If you get the chance, check out any of the books I have gone over in this video, because they are all great stories of the Flash, and let me know if there are any specific books that you want to have an in-depth overview on. Next video I will be going over Jack Kirby's Fourth World and how it connects to the DC Universe, as well as sneaking in some other books I will be talking about. I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know if you plan to pick up this book. Stay tuned for the next video.